When you start to play Flesh and Blood, it can be overwhelming. You have so many heroes to choose from, different mechanics to learn, and a huge card pool to dive into. To make your life as a beginner a little bit easier, we are talking about the 10 cards that every beginner needs to know in Flesh and Blood today. And all of these cards you can get for $1 or less. And my goal with this list is that you can power up one of your Blitz decks, or potentially go your first steps in the classic constructed format. And stick around to the end, cause the 9th card may even be a surprise for everyone. The first card you need to know is Scar for Scar. The card was first introduced in the Ira Welcome decks, and even reprinted in the Uprising Booster Draft set. Players mainly pick the red pitch version, because that one is really good for aggro decks, and its versatility can even be leveraged in a deck like Icelander. Scar for Scar really teaches you the value of Go Again, and with its base power of 4, you can dive into the power of breakpoints. Because blocking an attack that has 4 power is especially difficult for your opponent if he doesn't have a D-React. So when your opponent blocks Scar for Scar, only with 1 card from hand, he at least takes 1 damage. And with Scar for Scar, you are also learning the value of your life points. Because in Flesh and Blood, the life total is actually a resource to utilize on. Because Scar for Scar doesn't have Go Again naturally, it only gains Go Again if you have less life than your opponent. That's why this card was so strong in the deck Icelander, because Icelander was starting with 36 life compared to most other heroes on 40 life. So it was basically a free Go Again from the beginning. The second card you need to know is Ravenous Robl. Again, this card is only used in the red pitch version. Decks like Dromai and Azalea utilizing its power even in today's meta. And though Ravenous Robl came out in Arcane Rising, it was reprinted in the recent booster draft set Outsiders. Just as Scar for Scar, this card costs you no resources to play out. And usually, red line decks try to utilize the power of Ravenous Robl. Because even though Ravenous Robl starts with a base power of 5, it effect says that when you are attacking with it, you need to reveal the top card of your deck, and depending on the pitch value, Ravenous Robl loses attack power accordingly. So in red line decks, Ravenous Robl attacks in most cases for 4, and it has naturally Go Again. And don't underestimate the effect of Ravenous Robl, because some decks like Azalea can really utilize revealing the top card of your deck. The third card you really need to know in Flesh and Blood is Snatch. Snatch is an all-time classic, and even though it doesn't have Go Again, it's really powerful. Because if Snatch hits, you get to draw a card. So with Snatch your goal is to really learn the power of on-hit effects. But it's also a challenge for your opponent. Your opponent really needs to think about, do I want to block the Snatch and give away a D-React or 2 cards to block it fully? Or do I let the Snatch hit and potentially give my opponent an advantage? With your additional card that you get from Snatch, you can either arsenal it or use it on the same turn. And the challenge with Snatch is really to see when you want to play it out on the chain. Because here you are really diving into the value of Go Again and action points. With other cards you can potentially give Snatch Go Again, or you could play it out due to having additional action points, like in the deck with Dromai. But that's where our 4th card on the list is coming in. Snapdragon Scalers. Snapdragon Scalers is not only an all-time classic, but also one of the most powerful cards in the game. It came out in the first set, Welcome to Wraith, and is still being widely played till today's meta. You can use it as an attack reaction to give a cost 1 or 0 card Go Again, at least your attack actions. So with this card you are really learning which cards to give Go Again, like a Snatch for example. With this card you can also learn timing your equipment. Because in most cases you don't want to use Snapdragon Scalers in your first turn, but rather see when your most powerful turn is coming up. And that's where our 5th card on the list is coming in. This is surely a card that every Flesh and Blood player knows. Sink Below. And again, nearly 100% of players only play the red pitch version of this card. Sink Below is a defense reaction, which blocks for 4. But not only can you block breakpoints like Snatch with it, and play it out after you decided which cards you want to block with, but it also has an amazing effect. That can potentially clear up your hand. And this term is known in the community as sinking. Because when playing out Sink Below, you can choose a card in your hand, put it on the bottom of your deck, and draw a new one from the top. So you can switch out a card in your hand, maybe get a combo piece for next turn, or hopefully draw another D-React to defend yourself with. Sink Below is also one of those cards that is really powerful putting in the arsenal. So you can use it against attacks that are dominated. The 6th card every Flesh and Blood beginner needs to know is also in a defense reaction. Fate Foreseen. Also this card is nearly only played in the red version. But why do you want to play Fate Foreseen when you have an amazing deck like Sink Below? This is exactly why you need to know Fate Foreseen, because Sink Below is not always the best choice. Fate Foreseen and Sink Below share some of the most important attributes. They cost 0 and block for 4. But when you play out Fate Foreseen, you can opt 1. And this is a term every Flesh and Blood beginner needs to learn. Because opting means you can look at the top card of your deck and decide whether you want to stay on top or put it on the bottom. And that is especially good in decks like Azalea or Dash.io, because these decks really want to know which card is on top and if they can leverage on it. And if you know Fate Foreseen and Sink Below, you can also test out how many defense reactions you want to include into your deck. Because some decks you are playing against can really throw heavy attacks at you that you may want to defend with multiple defense reactions throughout the game. The next card you need to know as a beginner in Flesh and Blood is Reinforce the Line. In this case again, most players only play the red pitch version of the card. Unlike Fate Foreseen and Sink Below, Reinforce the Line is an instant and not a defense reaction. And this is a small but huge difference you need to learn as a beginner in Flesh and Blood. Because instants can not only be played whenever you want, at least when the terms of condition are met, but Reinforce the Line is a really good card against decks that are throwing dominated attacks at you, just like Bravo and Azalea. That way you can block with a card from hand and push its defending value by Reinforce the Line. But keep in mind that Reinforce the Line can only push the defense value of a defending attack action card, which makes Reinforce the Line really good in decks like Fire Rising Rebellion. And the next card you need to know as a beginner is a really spicy one. Oasis Respite. In this case again, all players I know only play it in the red pitch version. But why do you want to play Oasis Respite? Comparing it to Reinforce the Line, it is also an instant, but it doesn't push the block value of a card defending on the chain. Rather, it prevents the next 4 damage dealt to you by a source of your choice. And that is especially good against wizards or decks that want to push arcane damage. Because you can't block arcane damage, but you can prevent it. So with Oasis Respite you're learning what prevention is, and also that there's unpreventable damage in Flesh and Blood. Just like with a card like Tiger Stripe Shuko. And on top of the prevention effect, you can sometimes even gain 1 life off of the card. The 9th card on our list is a surprising one. Fandal's Fighting Spirit. This card is really interesting because you can learn the versatility of cards being used for different purposes. And you can also learn to consider different pitch values of the same card. The red pitch version of Fandal's Fighting Spirit is of course amazing. It costs 3 to attack with and it attacks for 7, so it also has a breakpoint. But it is also a popper for playing against illusionist decks like Doromai or Prism, so you can trigger their phantasm effects. And it also has an effect on attack, because you can then, if you have less life than your opponent, gain 1 life. Then there's also the blue pitch version of Fandal's Fighting Spirit, so you can generate 3 resources off of it. That's why it was tagged in decks like Bravo before. And despite it only defending for 2, it also has the gain 1 life effect when defending with the card. So in case you are blocking a 5 power attack from your opponent with a 3 block from hand and the Fandal's Fighting Spirit, if you have less life than your opponent, you're also gaining 1 life of it. For the last spot on our list of cards to learn as a beginner in Flesh and Blood, I actually want to give 2 different cards away for you. Null Rune Equipment and Spellfray Equipment. Even though they are really different cards, they can be used in similar situations. And that's why I think these cards need to be known by every Flesh and Blood beginner. These equipment pieces are played against wizards again, or decks that want to deal arcane damage. With these equipments you are learning how to counter wizards in general, but also you are learning how to prepare for arcane damage in certain situations. Like when you are playing against Dromai with Asvolai or Burn Them All, or against the Runeblade. But the most important thing that you are learning with these cards is when to use Arcane Barrier and when to use the Spell Void effect. Because this decision really matters in your deck strategy. Some decks have the resources to pitch a lot into the Arcane Barrier, to prevent multiple arcane damages per turn. And other decks may only want to include the Spell Void, so they don't need to spend resources to take care of the arcane damage. Now you learned the 10 most important cards to know as a beginner in Flesh and Blood. Like the video if you found it helpful, and write in the comments what you want to learn next as a Flesh and Blood beginner. And I really want to thank you for tuning in till the end, because I am planning on releasing more beginner-focused Flesh and Blood videos. So if you want to learn how to play Flesh and Blood, subscribe to the channel and check out one of the other beginner videos on the channel.